Welcome to Truth or Reps. So this is going to be one of those rare audio only episodes, probably. And it's actually me doing my best impression of the YouTuber Never Knows Best, who makes really high quality video game videos, similar to really similar to Ewarrenon and some of his flat Earth stuff. And that's a huge compliment, actually, because one of the main criticisms of Ewarrenon is that his stuff is so good, literally people think that that alone is an indication that there's, something to be wary of in his presentation. And Ewarrenon is actually pretty similar. Like, he puts together such high quality videos that it's sort of, he does them at a rate that's slow enough that, or did I say Ewarrenon? And Never Knows Best. Never Knows Best does these video game ones at a rate that is slow enough, is long enough between videos that I could imagine somebody making a video as epic as he does in that time period, but I don't know if it might have to be his full-time job or something. It's like he's been doing the whole history of video game RPGs, the entire history of video games, the entire history of Final Fantasy, or the Final Fantasy complete retrospective or something. He's been doing huge videos, but he did a really good video that I heard some other gamer YouTubers that he had actually gone after in one of his worst videos. Probably his worst video that I've seen by far. Never Knows Best's worst video. He's basically just talking about how YouTube video game content creators and other people in the video gaming community were going after this video game developer who had said some things that truly weren't that insulting to video gamers, or they really weren't insulting really at all to video gamers, but some people made some pretty skewed YouTube videos, or somebody made a pretty skewed Reddit post rather, talking about all these horrible things about this guy's speech. And unless Never Knows Best really selectively edited it, the speech it sounded like you heard essentially what the guy on Reddit was referring to, because he didn't play the whole thing, but he played parts. It sounded like you basically heard what you needed to hear to get the context for what the guy was saying as Never Knows Best was presenting it to you. And at the same time, it sounded like the Reddit guy was totally off base, and this guy was just delivering, sort of a TED Talky kind of speech wherever he was giving it. But then Never Knows Best goes on to show other YouTubers who are criticizing the same guy who gave the speech for talking about there not being a design document for a certain game, and how that seemed to indicate a lack of care about the finished product or something. But then even in the stuff Never Knows Best, I keep thinking Ewarrenon, that's strange, but even in the stuff Never Knows Best was showing of the YouTube video gamer guys in criticizing the other guy, the game developer guy, they were, didn't seem to be saying things as sloppily and really as dishonestly as Never Knows Best, again I thought to say Ewarrenon, is presenting them as saying them in his own video. But again, he's playing you the clips of them talking, and then their clips are kind of contradicting him in terms of he's saying oh, they said there was no design document, but they repeatedly said in the clips he was presenting that there was no central design document, which is a different statement from there was no design document, because I think there might have been multiple ones or something. So literally, if they were saying there was no central design document, that may have been an accurate statement. From what I gathered, it seemed to have been one, or accurate enough. And in any case, it just seemed like they were making a lot out of not too much, even though the game they were criticizing, Starfield, did look pretty. Overall, it did look pretty weak, despite how much money and work clearly went into it. And for various reasons, you could actually check out his video for perhaps some. I don't know if that video gives you that many reasons why Starfield wasn't that good of a game, but or just go check out like Synthetic Man's video. I like Synthetic Man, even though he is very much like a, and he even talks about himself being someone who's like ramping up the intensity for like more YouTube algorithm support of his channel. But anyway, in a video response featuring at least a couple people, I think, that Never Knows Best, not Iwaranon, did sort of show and kind of not dishonestly so much as just seemingly inaccurately and hilariously so, because again, it seemed like he was the emphasis that he was making was kind of defeated by what they were actually saying in the clips that he was playing of them. But in any case, a couple of these YouTubers were talking to like one or two other YouTubers, and they were like listening to like watching part of this Never Knows Best video in their video. And see, the thing is, I was, in some sense, I was on their side, but I kind of also wasn't, because despite his own flaws in his own video, Never Knows Best did show them, like the clips he showed did make them seem like they were kind of ridiculous in some sense. So I didn't really like anyone in this situation like that much. But these guys were like, they were like, oh, and he has a Never Knows Best. They were like going through his channel or something, and they were like, he has a video called Dark Souls is underrated, and they're like, Dark Souls is one of them says like Dark Souls is rated. It's one of the most rated games I've, like essentially the emphasis of what that guy was saying and saying that was like accurately rated. It is one of the most accurately rated games I've ever seen, and it's like, because Dark Souls is very beloved. And then another guy, and here's the thing, here's them playing fast and loose with just the language. Like another guy in the group, he's like, well, like like those videos where like they say something and but they say it to like sound ironic or something, and I think that guy went on to say like, yeah, that's what he was doing here or something like that. Or I don't know, because then another guy said, oh, so that's what he was doing here. And then it sounded like the first guy kind of paused and almost like thought about it, because it's really not what Never Knows Best is doing in the Dark Souls is underrated video. But he's like, yeah, that was what he's doing. But it's not. Because in Dark Souls is underrated, Never Knows Best actually says what he doesn't say, no, I'm just saying this to sound ironic. He says, like, I do think it's underrated. Like, it's a highly rated game, and it's a revered game, and people love it and people talk about it all the time, and yet still still think it's underrated because it's so good. And here's the thing, in watching like some of it over again, I've watched like maybe almost near the halfway point or something now, and I've watched it before. That's how good this guy's videos are. Like, it's just a video about like a popular video game series that like many other people have made videos talking about, and that you've seen a lot of videos talking about, and videos of just people playing that, and that you've played a decent amount of, not a lot of, but a decent little bit of, enough to beat one of the games in the series and be on your way to beating the game he's talking about here, Dark Souls, albeit Dark Souls Remastered, not the original version for the PS3. But it is just it's a great video, and in watching it, here's the thing, I'm going to go back again and say, I think that video kind of contradicts what Never Knows Best says in another video, because he says he has a video called Elden Ring is a disappointment or something like that. I think that might be the title. And Elden Ring is like the newest game in sort of that video game series from the same developer, but that series is like the Soulsborne series, so it includes the Dark Souls games, the Bloodborne, Sekiro, and Demon Souls game each, and then Elden Ring. And it's essentially all the games have like similar play mechanics, although some of them go slightly into different directions. But here's the thing: Elden Ring, basically, I think I should call this video, and I think I might call it Elden Ring is underrated. I think Elden Ring is underrated because it takes everything Never Knows Best, and I sort of felt the faded image of E. Warren on there. It takes everything Never Knows Best talked about Dark Souls being so good in and within it packs all those elements, whether it be the element of like being truly invested in the world you're in the video game, in Dark Souls specifically, but also in Elden Ring, because there's danger around every corner. So, if you play it for any period of time, you're going to start moving around more cautiously. And yet, also, I would say, when you get to the point where like you can move around more confidently, at least in certain parts of the game where like you realize it's a level of like it's a low enough level enemy that you can handle them pretty easily. And especially with something like the horse, you can, in many areas of the game, pretty early on in the game, you get a horse, like very early on in the game, actually. I hear the game's much longer than I've played so far, and I've already got the horse and had it for hours at this point. But, you could call up your horse real quick. Like, he just basically appears, and you jump in the sky, and he, like, appears underneath you. And then you go and, like, slash, like, 4 soldiers and, like, keep slashing them and riding around them and slashing them until they're dead. And it's like, these, in a different situation, these very enemies could kill you pretty quickly if they had you surrounded or something, and you weren't doing well in evading them, or blocking them or whatever else you were doing, attacking them back maybe. But it just it's basically it has all the intensity, that Never Knows Best talks about with Dark Souls, in terms of really feeling like you're on this like scary adventure where you really feel like you're in this world, and you're playing as if you are, because you're looking around every corner like sort of suspiciously, like what's going to be there. But it's even, in a certain sense, it's really heightened in Elden Ring because it's more of an open world than the Dark Souls games are. And I would say the Dark Souls games feel pretty open worldy, but given that most of the sections only have like a few branching sections to go off onto from, I guess it is sort of, it more feels open world than it is, because basically you're not going to get to this given section without getting through this one and that one or something, even though you could take this other way and get through this other one and that other one and maybe get to it, but then maybe you need an item from somewhere anyway. And but in Elden Ring, it's like it's fairly open, and there are fairly easy to see disparities between certain enemy types. So like at the beginning, it's like it's so overwhelming, you're like you don't know where to go at all, which Never Knows Best talks about in the Dark Souls video. Except and similarly to Dark Souls, and similarly well, after exploring enough, you start to realize, where it seems like you're more intended to go based on how difficult the enemies are. But I would say Elden Ring is particularly notable in this respect because it's just like somehow, so far with me anyway, in this open world where you really could go like in various different directions, just basically right after the tutorial, this open world, it's full of like different difficulty levels all around you. And so like basically you start to get a good sense of like how you can tell if an enemy is powered rightly for you or not. It's like, okay, like if an enemy takes this much damage when I hit him, or if he does this little damage to me, then he's okay. But if he does like that much damage with one attack, then I better get the hell out of there. And, you know, I might be able to beat him if I really tried, but like I essentially, it might not even be worth the time and patience for at this point, because it really doesn't seem like you're intended to fight them this level. But it's like there's so much openness, and yet it's constructed so well that, at least for me, I found that when I would wander into a place that had like enemies that seemed to be too powerful for me at that moment, I'd pretty soon realize it, and then I'd go somewhere else. At the same time, though, it's as Never Knows Best says with Dark Souls, it really sort of teaches you to push yourself, because there was this other enemy who basically, I don't think he killed me the first time I like checked him out, because I think I just ran away essentially, but this giant, and he like, the last time I had faced him, it was basically like I was like, okay, I'm not coming back here for at least a little while. I'm not even going to try this guy. So then, essentially, the second time I went up to him, but this time, essentially knowing that he was there, I lured him out, and then I fought him, and it was sort of an intense fight, and there were other enemies like sort of creeping up and walking up and kind of coming after me as well a little bit, but his attacks would also hurt them, and he's a freaking giant, so he's like four, five, six times the size of us, seven maybe, and it is, you know, so it's a charged situation that I'm in here, and I'm fighting him, and somehow I pull it off. And here's the other thing: I like summon these like sort of ghost entities kind of type things that can like fight for me for a limited amount of time, and they're actually pretty powerful, and they actually work as a pretty good crutch. And see, I saw in a different video, someone was like talking about how Elden Ring gave you all these tools in your tool set, and you could play through the game without those tools, but you could also use the tools. And it's like, essentially, I was thinking like, you know, if I didn't summon, I think I could have beaten this part even in this particular fight if I didn't summon these guys, but they really did help me out. So it was sort of like just using a tool that you knew you didn't really have to, but it just made it a little easier. And that mixed with like the map and the fast travel and like being able to set checkpoints for yourself, it's actually helped me appreciate in a whole new way just how beautiful it is to be able to fast travel to different places. I mean, the way they do it, it doesn't feel cheap because you still have to find the bonfires to fast travel to. So like, you know, the map is so big and it's like so unmarked even when you're looking at like the map screen, not even just walking around in the world. The map is so huge that you don't even like, essentially you don't even know, like you get to a part where it's like, okay, I've gone far enough. I just killed that giant back there and I fought some other guys and I went down this road, and it's like now I seem to be in a new area. There should be a new bonfire for me to set a checkpoint at pretty soon, or for me to fast travel to and rest at and blah blah blah. It basically like creates a new hub on the map that you can go to anytime you want, that you can fast travel, which is most times, but I guess maybe not when you're in a dungeon or in a boss fight. Or anyway, essentially, even at that point where I was like, there should be a bonfire here, I was like looking around for a little while, and if I went in the wrong direction, I could have gone like, I don't know how far I would have gone before like finding something else, but I could have like gone pretty far astray. It felt like that anyway if I went in the wrong direction and didn't find the bonfire nearby. So it's like finding a bonfire, even in like the other Dark Souls games, and even really especially in some of the other games that I've played, even more so than I've seen in Elden Ring so far. It feels like a real relief and a real achievement and a real accomplishment to get to the bonfires. But in this game, it's like, it feels like that, and yet when you get to it, now that sets up a point that you can fast travel to. So now you have another little point of grasp in this world that you're moving through, and not even all of the map is filled up. You have to find map fragments to fill up different parts of it. So for a while I didn't have the fragment for like one of the earlier parts in the game, but I had like a later fragment, and I'm still not even that far. Like I have 3 map fragments right now and it's like almost nothing. But essentially it seemed like everything Never Knows Best was saying, whether it be the nature of the world like slapping you down and kind of teaching you how to navigate it, or the fact that it is so dangerous that you do like walk around with caution and stuff, or even in this game more so than others, perhaps just with the speed of the horse in general, it's actually like sort of fun because when you are feeling confident, it's actually like a nice relief. It's like, oh yeah, I'll take these enemies down with ease, and you feel like kind of a badass, and you also feel like it's kind of nice. It's like, there are plenty of enemies that you're not really you're not really comfortable like going up against quite yet, but these enemies are fine. It feels like a real relief and just like a fun time like playing on the playground to defeat them. And anyway, one thing that I think it was the guy who had the guy I was referring to, not Never Knows Best, but somebody who had mentioned, that the game gives you all these tools to utilize. That person made a really good point. They were like, when you get to the end of the game, people have pointed out how really super hard it is, and it's like, yeah, it's super hard, and yet the creators of this game have given you all these different tools in this game that are just it feels like it just feels essentially it feels like a whole new feature set, not just like more tools, but just like a whole new layer, a whole new structure of tools that the other games just didn't have at all. I'm saying that right here right now. And it's like the game gives you so much of those, and as the guy was saying in the video, it really gives you the opportunity to use those tools to get through the end of the game. And it's like, you could get through the end of the game perhaps if you were just playing it like any other Dark Souls game or Soulsborne game or whatever, but it's given you all these tools. It expects you, or it's given you these ways to get through this super amped up difficulty section, and it sort of creates this perfect union of like just a total sandbox, sort of like Splinter Cell or something. You're Sam Fisher going through your toolkit to like get through this mission, however you want to, and like you could even literally stealth it for these things. Like you can be kind of like Sam Fisher or Solid Snake or whatever, and it's like it creates this perfect sort of sandbox experience. But then it also sort of naturally, there's been this big thing about like, should Dark Souls games have difficulty modes, and like, are the developers mean to not give people difficulty modes, or are the people pussies to ask for difficulty modes? And it's like this game basically gives you not only like the ultimate sandbox to go around and play Dark Souls in, and by the way, some of these areas are just freaking gorgeous, and I've only gotten like again only through a small section of the game, probably like maybe verging on 10-15%, 16 if that, of like the areas in the game to go through so far. And it's just like these are some of the most beautiful areas I've seen. Like just at least a few of them have just like sort of been breathtaking. Like it's been amazing. And yet it also creates this perfect like playground of like, you can make this game grindingly, gruelingly difficult for yourself by playing it like a Dark Souls game, or you can play it more like the game that it presents itself as to you and play it like Elden Ring.